Let's start with a prayer. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, friend, beloved God, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Sri Yukteswar, our beloved Guru Deva, Paramahansa Yoganandaji, saints of all religions, beloved Swamiji, we humbly bow before you all. Great Masters, help us to remember always that the purpose and joy of this life lies in what we give to others, and not, in fact, in what we receive. Help us to remember to see you in everyone, and to know at every moment that we are serving you through all of your children. Help us to keep our consciousness raised in an effort to see nothing but you. Om, peace. Amen.
Without seeing thee, my Lord, will my days
let's meditate together now for a few minutes. We won't meditate for too long. So let's all focus at raising our energy up to the point between the eyebrows and keeping our concentration and awareness there. Focus tonight on diving deep as quickly as we can, calling on God to reveal himself to us in this very moment. Reveal thyself. Reveal thyself. Oh, peace. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. We invite you now to watch. Am I on? Okay, good. We invite you now to watch a dance that was choreographed and performed by Suryani and filmed by Karen Gamow. So please enjoy this now for a couple of minutes.
Long
I'll leave it on. Yeah, it's good. I feel like I'm a little too close to the camera. Would you look and see if you agree? Am I on again? David's saying I'm not too close to the camera. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Wasn't that beautiful? Yeah. Karen Gamow and Suryani did it. And what a great job of editing. And I'm very grateful. Perfect for tonight and beautiful. So, for those of you who missed 2 weeks ago, I will tell you now, and those of you who were here will remember, that it was New Year's Day, and I couldn't bear to speak about cynicism on New Year's Day. Even though, of course, what Swamiji does is he shows us how to dissolve, neutralize, lift ourselves out of whatever the emotion is. I just couldn't bring myself. Cynicism is even a hard word, isn't it? There's a lot of consonants in it. So somehow I just felt an aversion to doing that. But here we are now, it's January 15th, and we're back to cynicism. Somehow it feels easier tonight. I wanted to read to you, I looked up the definition in a couple of different dictionaries today, the definition of cynicism. So the first one is an inclination to believe that people are motivated purely by self-interest or skepticism. So cynicism, skepticism, all thinking people are motivated by self. For us, that's a little s, by the way, self-interest. The belief that people are only interested in themselves and are not sincere. And then the last one was the fact of using someone's feelings or emotions to your own advantage. I have to say, I could see why I didn't want to dive into cynicism, even needing to lay out what it means. Of course, I knew that. I hadn't looked up the definition, but I knew that. I felt it. I'm opening my phone just so that I can read to you Swamiji's secret. He's talking about the secret for overcoming cynicism. He says, is to concentrate on the needs of others and not to dwell on the thought that life or other people owe it to you to be different from what they are. Now, cynicism is a hard word, and were I to just be in conversation with any of you, I can see you all now. I know that I wouldn't call any of you cynical. I wouldn't use that word, but you can see the tendencies, where they are and how they can surface. So again, the secret for overcoming cynicism is to concentrate on the needs of others and not to dwell on the thought that life or other people owe it to you to be different from who or what they are. Now, excuse me while I put my phone down. See what happens when you work all the time with people who are in their 30s? Suddenly you're reading things from your phone. When did that happen? You know, it's so funny to me. You have to keep up with life or, you're done. When you hear that, when Swamiji says not to think that they owe it to you to be different from who or what they are, it makes it easier to want to hear how to overcome it, because it already begins to get subtle. You already, if you're honest, because if we're honest, every one of us could very easily remember a time, maybe even this afternoon. I mean, we don't have to look very far usually, where we unconsciously would have wanted somebody to be different. Somebody we're working with, a supervisor, our children, our partner, you know, and I have found myself arguing over the course of very long times, trying to convince people about why they should be different. Now, I don't mean in a therapeutic environment where somebody's coming to you and paying you, because this happens to me, to help them change or to transform. That's one thing. But to actually think that your life would be different if somebody else were behaving differently or treating you differently. And Swamiji's saying that's the way to overcome that feeling of all of these definitions of cynicism, people being motivated purely by selfish interest, which means kind of, I want what I want when I want it. And this is about me more than it's about you. And again, when you say that, or when I say it, it can sound so gross in the sense of being big and harsh. And most of us are way too sophisticated and grown up and spiritually evolved to behave that way. We're just not that obvious. But I bet if we look, we can still see how much that drives our behavior. You know, I love, this is a parenthetical statement. I love, both in classes and with my clients, actually, teaching or sharing by sharing stories from my own life. Because it's very easy to hear the point in somebody else's life. If I would look at anybody and say, you know, I saw you do this, and really hard to hear it. But when you hear me, in this case, tell a story about my own life, it sort of sets something off in most people's minds. Very often people say to me, you know, when you told that story, it made me realize. And then people remember all the times that they've behaved that way. But recently, and I don't want to embarrass anybody, but recently, after my talk a month ago, if you can go back that far, which was on hurt feelings, and I shared a story that had happened with Barry and I that very morning. Do you remember? I woke up, he was mean to me, I cried. It was just, I have to giggle. And of course, I shared the story. The point of the story was, within a little bit of time, I got over it and what it meant to get over it. But several people reached out to me with great concern. Are you okay? Are you and Barry okay? It's very loving. So first of all, Barry and I are great. We're very great. And I will continue to share stories about Barry and I because he's never watching. He only watches my Sunday services, so I have free reign here to tell stories about him. Sometimes when I go home, he says, did you talk about me all night? And I say, yeah, I did. Jokingly, I say it like that so he doesn't really think I did, but I did. Anyway, don't worry about us. Nobody has to worry about us. And in fact, I'll tell you, if I'm telling you the story about something that happened, you never have to worry about me. I'm telling you because there's a beginning and an end. If I'm still stuck in it, I'm probably not as able to talk about it. So I say that again. I know it was all coming from a very loving place, but I wanted to tell everybody. Now, the story that just went running through my mind that I might have shared is gone, but chances are there will be more of them tonight. So this notion of cynicism I came to see after reading a little bit about any time the word cynicism came up in Swamiji's or Master's classes or books. And I'm going to read some stuff to you tonight, which I don't usually do, but I want you to hear a few things. I realized how subtle it is. A friend of mine asked me when she heard about this class, what is cynicism? Am I cynical? And I said to her very, actually seriously, no, you're not, but I can see the tendency in you, like the inclination you could be cynical. Well, in a way, of course, we could all be, and that's part of why Swamiji put it in his secrets books. Again, because for several reasons, we definitely, more often than we'd like, would like people to be different with us than how they're being. So we've already not followed Sister Gyana Mata's brilliant, inspired statement when she said she was in the middle of a rough time. This is Paramahansa Yogananda's foremost female disciple, as I think most of you know. And she said, suddenly it came to me, an inspiration came, and she prayed the prayer, change no circumstance in my life, change me, which is so beautiful. And think about it. How many of us could ask for that? Sometimes we say these things so often. That's such an oft-quoted phrase of hers that we can get away from the depth of the meaning. Change no circumstance in my life, change me, with such a deep understanding that everything that's coming to us in our life is genuinely an opportunity for spiritual growth. And what we'll see tonight, or I'll just say it right now and then maybe we'll come back to it, is that the way out of cynicism, one of the things, one of the ways, one of the thoughts, one of the motivators, is when we can see God in everyone, and when we can see that clearly, when we can see every other person wanting the same things that we want. Everybody wants to be happy, and everybody is almost always pretty much doing the best they can. And when we feel that, and the more we practice looking into each other's eyes and seeing the divine, we become, without thinking about it or practicing it, channels and receivers of divine love. We see God in everyone, and we're sharing that love with them. If you see God in everyone, your heart opens. There is no room to be judgmental, or to be wanting them to be different, or to be finding fault, or to be thinking that they're just there to please you. Swamiji makes, I should say, in his, I would say, some of his earlier books, and up until a couple of decades ago, he quit writing exactly like this that I'm going to read to you, but his earlier books were very much the way I'm finding a little trouble about how exactly to say it and be true to Swamiji. That's why I'm tripping over some words here. Swamiji often quoted philosophers, psychologists, psychiatrists, scientists, a lot of the scientists, by way of saying to us, they had a very clear way that they thought the world was to be. And he has a very great phrase here that I wanted to quote from one of his books. Now I don't remember which one there was. But he says, at a certain time in our evolution, he said there arose a growing cynicism produced to a large extent by the discoveries of science. And remember, from the time Master was born until he left, huge numbers of scientific experiments and proofs. So we became more and more in the early part of the 20th century, the late 1800s and through the middle of the 1900s, very much in our minds. And if you think about it, and I won't spend a lot of time here, but it wasn't just science which laid down this is the way it's supposed to be. I mean, we talk a lot about Einstein who intuited E equals mc squared. He did. It came to him in a flash. But everybody still insisted that he prove it, and he had to come up with the mathematical equations to prove that. People wanted that. People want proof. I mean, I grew up in this profession of medicine, and to a large degree, to this very day, if you can't show proof on an X-ray or on in a scientific study in a lab, or I could go on and on, to most of my colleagues, they won't buy whatever it is. They don't buy into intuition, expansion of consciousness, a sudden knowing. So that you've all heard me tell stories so many times. Some of the magnificent moments of my career came to me in a flash like that. And I'm not going to tell the stories, but many times my colleagues would say to me, "How did you know that?" And then I would say, "Oh, you wouldn't believe it," or "Oh, it's a long story," because they wouldn't believe it. It was actually a very short story in a way. But through scientific exploration, and the better we got at it, Swamiji's saying, the more we became entrenched in a mindfulness, in a very solid mind way of looking at things. We began to depend on our intellect, is really the right way of saying that. So then he says here, he says after that, he said the age of reason in the 18th century of the mind. A lot of the great psychologists, the whole study of psychology was coming about that. The materialistic bias of the 19th century and the growing skepticism of the 20th century, he said, all caused a widespread loss of faith in transcendent realities of any kind. And it's really what happened. I'm sorry, I know this talk is a little more, I was thinking about it before. Here I am speaking more of the mind, more intellectual than I usually do, but it's very important because Swamiji, he had to explain to us what it meant for us to get out of that way of thinking, all of those ways. And all of those ways of thinking basically got us moving into a train of thought that said, the more you have, the more people give to you, the more wealth you accrue, the more material things that you have, the better off you are. This all came, of course, it started almost in the 1400s or earlier, but it just kept growing, and we kept getting better at it. But getting better at it meant that we were moving further away, as he said, from what he called, let me just find that sentence. Oh, it's over here. From a loss of faith in transcendent realities. So we moved away from many of the of Saint Francis, Saint Teresa, many of the great saints, many of the great teachers who had lived. We were becoming more and more ensconced in a material world. Now, we all know that, but it is hand in hand. Materialism will go hand in hand with cynicism, because the more we're involved in materialism, the more we want. The more we want, the more we feel like somebody else should be giving it to us. The more we begin to see the world as a place for us to get. And as soon as we see the world as a place to get, we begin to forget that true joy comes from giving, way more than it does from receiving. So he's teaching us in these early days as he's trying to establish spiritual community and bring all of the knowledge that he had from Yogananda and his extraordinary connection with Yogananda. being able to be so in tune with him that everything he did was transcendent. It was of the spirit and of the soul, not of the material world Swami Kriyananda I'm speaking about now, but that was because of who his guru was, and how for the rest of his life after Master passed, or from the minute he met Master, every minute of that man's life, every second, was about Master, which meant it was about qualities of the soul. It was about, instead of realism being founded in which the scientists would say, this is real, that's real, this is real, all of that can be proved, that we can put our hands on, and that's in the world. And remember, we're such a minority, this group of people who's here right now, we're just such a minority in terms of knowing that realism has nothing to do with that. What is real is of the soul. What is real is based in divine love. It's about everything that we can do to cultivate love, to opening our hearts, to be so much more concerned about what we can give than what we receive. And not just that, not just I'll give, but knowing, and this is where it gets really tricky and really into, not just spirituality 101, but like the postdoc level, when you begin to realize that you're giving nothing, that God is giving everything through you. And while that's very hard to communicate in words, it is a practice. And the more we practice, even literally just never saying, I did this, I did that, I did this. I remember many years ago now, there was a friend of mine, I'll call him a friend, who sort of hell-bent, if you will, on constantly showing me what was wrong with me and what I was doing wrong. I've told some of these stories before. And one day he called me over, as he used to do. I'd like to talk with you, I always knew. But now I was getting smart, and I started practicing that I would not let myself be reactive, that I would take it in, whatever he was going to say to me. It was God's grace, because it's not just what I got from him then, but being able to be still and quiet no matter what's being slung at you, and just receive it with an open heart and with love and with joy. It's an amazing experience. It's part of how to combat cynicism. It's a big part of it, this practice of, you can't fake it, but feeling joy even when criticism or a lot of hurtful energy is coming your way, because then you're always with God, and you cannot be cynical when you're with God. Anyway, he said to me many, many things that day about what was wrong with me, and he told me that I used the word I too much. You always say, I did this and I did that. He said, you're so egoic. Well, this was many years ago, and I was certainly more egoic than I am now. I've obviously not completely transcended my ego by any means, but I was worse then. And when he was done talking to me, I said to him, thank you so much for having the courage to tell me all of this. And I said, I want to take some time and really take it seriously and think about what you said. And he looked at me and he said, really? He had talked for an hour. And I said, yeah. And an important part of this story is that he burst out in tears and said to me, I really think I was talking about myself, which was a lot of the truth. But when I left there, I thought to myself, no matter how often you say, I did this or I did that, it's not a good thing. So listen to what he said and don't do that anymore. And I began to practice saying, we did this or we did that. Most often it's true. You know, we work as a team, we work as a family. It's rare for any one person. It doesn't matter. And never mind that God's behind it all. So even if I sort of in the world single-handedly created a program, an event, it's not me. It's always God coming through. So it was such a great gift that he gave me, an extraordinary gift. I think about it often, and I was just talking with another friend the other day about what an important practice that is, to quit using the word I, because it rarely has any meaning. It's really never true. And I haven't gotten lost. I'm speaking here about cynicism. If you begin to always know more and more and more, it's not I. There is no I here. It's just an illusion. There's only divine energy pouring through. And the same with other people. Then it really always is God serving God. You have to practice that. We all do. I mean, I have to practice it all the time. Of course I do. I mean, I'm speaking to myself, not you happen to be here with me, but I'm talking of myself. We, all of us, because the words don't make sense. God's always working through me. The mind can't understand that, but the experience of it, the soul knows. And that's where truth lies. And that's when we begin to see the extraordinary wisdom in change not my circumstance, but change me. Help me to remember it's not I anything. There is no I here. And it's not even you, because there's no you there. It's always God serving God. So when Swamiji and Masters say over and over and over that you will be cynical if you continue to stay in this physical reality that we've been so well trained for the last 100 and some years in thought, in this materialistic world. This was the sentence I just read to you. In every way. Oh, it's the mind that's really important. And there were a lot of brilliant psychiatrists and psychotherapists who came through this time. And look at what's happened with making money, buying things, having things. If we live in that world, we will be cynical. We have to be cynical. It brings it out in us. But the more we can move towards our spiritual nature, cynicism cannot exist there. And it's important to remember, again, cynicism is not just for sinister people. It occurs in us. I'd like to read to you, let me just read this one sentence. I just saw it here. Swamiji says from somewhere, I don't know where it was. He said, Yogananda was a harbinger sent by God to help us lift our eyes to the dawn of a new age of divine realization. Now, we could all sit here and say, I knew that. Of course I know that. We've all been hearing it for a long time. But remember, we have a particular topic tonight. So to hold that he came to lift us into a divine realization, which is actually the way to make sure that we're never a cynic. It's the way to do it. I mean, it's every one of these emotions that we're talking about, we could see very specifically how Master's teachings, Master came to teach us how to become God-realized saints. And until we are, of course, we're all going to be troubled by a lot of these feelings. But let me just read something to you. This book, Hope for a Better World, is a book that Swamiji wrote in 2002. And it's an extraordinary book. He wrote it about, the subtitle is The Small Communities Solution, which, of course, as you know, was one of his charges from Master, because he talks about the garden party where he heard Master say, go north, south, east, and west, and basically build these communities of high thinking and simple living, which is what Ananda is. And Swami Kriyananda allowed that to happen through him. Let me say that. He wouldn't want to say he did it. In fact, he told us a story where one night he heard himself saying, look at what I did. And then he said, wait a minute, do I like that? Even do I want to hold on to that thought? He said, absolutely not. He got in touch with the limitation of that, and the egoic energy behind it. And he immediately realized he didn't do anything. God did it all through him. That was a moment of exactly what we're talking about tonight. But I wanted to read to you something that a couple of these people who wrote, they wrote comments on the book. I forget what they're called. You know, where somebody reads your book. I can't think of it. That's crazy. What's the name I'm thinking of? Does anybody know? Anyway, They're not really exactly reviews, but they're like that. But these are on the opening page here, these comments on the book. But Swamiji said, he was talking about this man who wrote this review that was written. He had said a lot of nice things about Swamiji, calling him an original thinker, which is really important. He was saying he was not going to allow himself to be contained by, and he lists a lot of these people. I mean, all of the great philosophers of the time that came before him. But he said here, well-meaning desire isn't the only prerequisite to successful creation or fostering communities, he said. He said, Walters, that's Swamiji, reveals hidden legacies from philosophers of the past that influence our thinking today, means keeps us small-minded in a way, even though we held those people as great. Let me just, and how their conception of the individual in relation to society directly affects our current relationships. He says he is really onto something when he calls us heirs for good or ill of, and he lists these people, Machiavelli, Adam Smith, Karl Marx, and more, meaning if we're not thinking, because he calls him an original thinker, then we'll be heirs to everything that they said. I just want to move forward here. There's a few words here that are just so important. Walters brings us new hope by pointing to human potentials deeper than materialistic and Darwinian expectations. This is not a utopian work, meaning we're not going to get by just thinking, oh, there will be a perfect world where everybody will give me everything I want and we'll all live happily ever after. That's not going to happen, is what this reviewer is saying. Anyway, it goes on and on. They're beautiful because these are other great minds looking at what Swamiji wrote and said, listen to what this man is saying. The answer to, and he lists all of the issues. And again, constantly Swamiji and Master come back to it, particularly with cynicism, is to lift ourselves up out of the rational into the transcendent. So that's our charge, in a way. That's what we're being charged with here. And again, it sounds simple, maybe, in some ways. It's not simple, and it's not easy. Though many spiritual teachings we say are simple but not easy. This isn't. This is really about changing the way that we've been thinking, the way every one of us has been conditioned. So it's in the most subtle parts of our being that we have that potential to be cynical, though we don't know it, and to sort of live with this, but what about me attitude. And that's what brings about, or that more. Even if it's my family owes me more, I want to make just a little more money, whatever the more is that's based on what we've learned spiritually. So the story that I was going to share with you before just crossed through my mind again. So I'll tell it to you. It's a good example of this. This past summer, every one of you know this, I spent 4 entire months driving up and down Route 5. I spent most of my life either in the car getting there or in Southern California, helping my daughter-in-law and my grandchildren. And I could say there was a great cost to that, except it was so filled with grace that what looked like this crisis, tragedy, challenge, just God was with me. So, I mean, it was not bad being on Route 5. Lakshmi happened to be there too. But God himself was there. And I felt that for 4 months. I wrote it to all of you, you knew it. So I didn't have a complaint about it. But last week, I called her and I said to her, you know, I want to take a 3-week seclusion in March, but it would be really hard for me to leave Barry for 3 weeks right now. Who's her father, by the way. Barry's her father. So I said, do you think you could come up for a few days in the middle week while I'm gone? So he'll be alone for a week, then I'll have you, then he'll be alone. And she said, no, I can't do that. She said, the kids are in school and I'm teaching. She said, I just don't think I can do it. And I wish I could tell you that I just said, wonderful, fabulous, but I didn't. I didn't get really upset because I had some restraints on getting too upset. But my mind went to, after all I did for you, my mind went there. It took me, this is the truth, about 3 hours to get back to center. So 3 hours, but it was 3 hours of you owe me, why can't you do more for me? You owe your father. Even in that circumstance, you see, we can become so self-righteous because probably most of you are thinking, she could come up here for a week or for 5 days. I brought the kids up myself while they were in school so that she could have alone time with her husband. We're all online doing everything. You can do it from anywhere. You could pretty much do it from Mars if you wanted, you know? So it was easy to get into that. Wait a minute. After all we've done, you're not, you know, like that. No. And I see where that leads to a cynical attitude, a cynical energy running through me. I promise you, and I'm not proud of myself that it happened that way, but 3 hours later, when I just let it go, and I just said to myself, you know, she is really doing the best she can. She doesn't owe me anything. My goodness, God himself was driving up and down Route 5. I should be thanking her. I should be bowing at her feet in gratitude, really, because I got to do that. I mean, that's really the truth. But here's the most important thing. As soon as I let go of it and my heart could open like that, what a different feeling to be in love and not be in judgment, in demand. Do you know what I hope I'm saying this. It just changed everything. Swamiji wrote one of our affirmations that we do. It's here, and I'm going to find it for you. Yeah. We actually do it the last week of the year, number 52, high-mindedness. And he says here in this affirmation, he says, people often speak of cynicism as the mark of realism, meaning everything that makes us cynical, that's what makes things real in life. And it's really true of the vast majority of the population, again, if you think about it, because they justify cynicism. You could see how easy it would have been for me to justify it with Jez. It would have been so easy. God's grace when you don't do it. You don't get stuck there. I did it, but I got saved. So he says, people often speak of cynicism as the mark of realism. In fact, in a universe without any visible center, one might justifiably develop his understanding of it from any conceivable starting point. So he's saying there's no visible center in our universe. We can call anything the beginning of the universe. We can make anything real. And we can call reality anything. And of course, we watch people around us. We all do that all the time. We create our own reality. One's understanding, however, will only reflect who and what he himself is. A view from the depths lacks the perspective that can be achieved from the heights. He says, strive always to be a channel for high thoughts and inspirations. Never cooperate with anything petty or mean. Remember, the universe is, for each human being, both a mirror and an affirmation. Now that's deep. We're not going to have time. But take that sentence after this class and think about it, that the universe is both a mirror and an affirmation. That's an extraordinary statement. One who entertains high thoughts will be himself ennobled. And so, it's saying, hold your thoughts as high as you can. Even use it as an affirmation if you need to. This is, after all, an affirmation. I didn't even read the affirmation, which says, I will see goodness in everything. I will view the world around me not from the depths of matter attachment, but from the heights of divine aspiration. It's a beautiful affirmation. Number 52, just look it up. But we can start simply. We can start by remembering not to use the word I. We can start by remembering to practice seeing God in everyone and everything, no matter whose eyes you look into. Even in the moment of greatest upset, you look at them. It's the truth. God seeing God, God serving God. We don't owe each other anything. We owe it to ourselves to be the very best that we can be, to keep moving on this path, to raise our thoughts, to raise our energy, to do our best to be remembering our true reality. It's hard. Of course it's hard. That's why it takes millions of lifetimes. But it's definitely doable. And it's doable, as Swamiji and Master have both told us. This is no joke for every one of us in this very lifetime. Self-realization doesn't take a long time. It takes right attitude. It takes willingness. It takes effort. It takes concentration, not lifetimes. In a moment, we can be there. Okay, I've gone over, which I don't usually do. Before we stop, and it's fine, if you need to go, you can go. Does anybody have, of course you can go, but you can go with my blessings if you need to go. Does anybody have any questions or comments? This was, I felt, a little more subtle tonight than some of the classes have been. Any comments? Jyoti?
I just wanted to thank you for not the previous class, and I'm wondering if it's same concept would hold true even with this, coping up with cynicism. You mentioned about not having expectations from others and, carrying God and Guru with you will keep you centered. And I've been doing that really, and it's so helpful to just know that, you're with your Guru, you're with God, and it really keeps me centered, and I just, just go with that as a really, really big blessing to know and to hold that. So I was wondering if the same concept would help even with this cynicism. It seems so. Is that right?
Exactly. Thank you for saying that. Yeah, because we were talking about hurt feelings then. And we say, it's the same thing. I mean, I hadn't thought of it that way because there was much else that was said, but still, it's the same thing. It's we expect so much from other people, and we expect it in terms of our reality. And it's not their reality. It's not necessarily their karma, their way. It's not what would serve them, but we want people to meet our needs. And we're inevitably going to be, at best, hurt, and at worst, held back spiritually. So yeah, I think what you just said, and the way you said it, I'm just trying to paraphrase it, but if you could say it again, because I'm losing it. You said with the same concept, which you've been doing, because it's the truth. Yeah. Do you want to repeat it? Can you even?
Yeah, it's taking God and Guru wherever you go, and not, and that really helps one staying, to stay centered, and nothing outward can really pull you out.
Beautiful. Yeah.
So I just say that prayer, and I'm like, just be with me, no matter where I go, just keep me in that center. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah, that's very beautiful. And, however God said that to both of us, I really appreciate it, because this is what I said before when I said, if your heart's open and you are in love with God and Guru, your feelings can't get hurt. You can't be cynical. Nothing. They're antithetical to those other feelings, or they're antidotes, actually. I mean, being with God and Guru is pretty much an antidote to everything humanly possible, but it's perfect. Yeah. Just walk with them all the time. The more I remember once when I was in medical school, I was with this professor, and she was checking for lymph nodes everywhere. And I was being skeptical and cynical. And she was looking for lymph nodes. She was showing me how to do a physical exam. She was checking for lymph nodes right here it's called the antecubital space on the other side of your elbow. And I was being a brat, is what I was being. I said to her, so how many times do you ever actually find a lymph node there? And she said to me, very calmly, not very often, but I'd never find it if I didn't look. And it was so perfect that she said that, because it's like this. We probably aren't going to be perfect at remembering to be with God and Guru, and remembering to see God in everyone, remembering. But if we don't start trying, or remembering to say, look at what we did, look at what we were able to accomplish, instead of look at what I did, all of those things. If we don't start practicing, we'll never get there. So it's a wonderful way to live. Thank you, Jyoti. Anybody else?
Shanti, I just want to say that is really helpful, that idea of saying we. It's just, I've been trying really hard to keep Master in my mind and have that concept of working with Master, and that's just a really simple way, I think, that I can use to remember how to do that. So I really appreciate that.
Very good. I love that. And we all have that person who is determined to show me all the ways that I'm wrong, but we can both be bowing at his feet now. It's really helped me, and I'm very glad to hear you say that. It's simple. That is simple. And it's actually relatively easy. So good. Yeah. Anybody else? Okay, let me just mention, I should have mentioned it earlier, but I'll tell you. Tomorrow morning, we are doing a spiritual questions answered here. We're meditating together from 8 to 9. It's on, it's live stream or Facebook, so you can go to the Ananda Palo Alto website and get on it. And then from 9 to 10, I'll be here. There'll be a group of us here, but we'll be answering any spiritual questions that you have. If you go there now, you can send them ahead of time, or you can just put them in the chat on Facebook, or you can enter them on live stream, though you have to register with live stream first. They've been wonderful each time we've done them. And as we keep writing in the notes that we send out, it's a guarantee that whatever questions you have, they're going to serve a lot of people. So send in some very good questions and join us, and we should have a good morning if you're free to do that. 9 to 11 are the questions. Meditate 8 to 9 if you want to. Meditate with us. Q&A is 9 to 11 tomorrow morning. So, all right, good night, great souls. Are you serious? I was so